Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to this presentation. My name is Tobias Dunn-Krahn. I'm CTO at xMatters, and today we're going to be talking about incidents. In particular, we're going to be, first of all, defining what sort of incidents we're talking about. We're going to talk about the folks that care about these incidents. Mostly, we're going to focus on what we as software developers can apply from what we've learned from Agile Principles towards incident management. And finally, we're going to see some of these ideas in action with a short demo. So first off, let's define what we mean by incidents. Despite what the slides might suggest, we're not talking about alien invasion or other similar catastrophes. We're actually talking about interruptions to the digital services that we as software developers provide for our customers. And the most impactful of these, of course, are complete outages to these digital services. This is when a service is just completely unavailable to our customers. Thankfully, these type of outages are rare in this day and age, and more commonly, we might see something like performance degradations. For example, web pages loading slowly, or perhaps having a very slow mobile experience. So these are more common. If we are looking at getting ahead of these types of impacts, we might have defined SLOs, service level objectives, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail later. And a breach of an SLO threshold or approaching a breach might cause us to declare an incident to investigate further and hopefully prevent a customer impacting incident. We also have other tools at our disposal. So with the ability to collect lots of metrics and run machine learning algorithms on those metrics, we might be detecting anomalies. We might not know what the anomaly means, but we know that it could be important. So we might declare an incident to investigate further. But all of these things really boil down to the same thing, which is we're concerned with anything that's going to cause a bad customer experience. So who are the types of folks that are most interested in these types of incidents? Customers, of course, are impacted by them primarily. But with the popularity of DevOps practice, many companies have cross-functional teams that have been assigned specific digital services. These digital services could be business-facing services like, let's say, order processing, or they could be back-end services like, for example, a database cluster or something like that. So we call these service teams, and they have the primary responsibility for these digital services being in operation 24/7. In larger organizations, we also see specialized teams that are formed to handle incidents. These could be IT teams, or they could be specifically major incident teams that are trained for the largest and most impactful of these types of incidents. In an incident where you have not caught it before your customers do, you will have inbound customer inquiries or reports of issues. And in that case, you will very likely have a customer support group involved to be able to communicate with these customers what the impact is and what the anticipated time of resolving the incident is. For more important and larger incidents, engineering management would likely want to be involved or perhaps be kept informed of the progress of the remediation activities. So in these cases, they can provide extra resources or provide guidance if necessary. And finally, for the most important and impactful incidents, executives want to be kept in the loop so that they can perhaps talk with press if this is a very public-facing incident, or also discuss with customers the ongoing remediation efforts. So as you can see, incidents can vary in their size and impact quite a bit. So in a DevOps Nirvana world, an incident might be that monitoring has caught an issue. The on-call person for the impacted service is paged. They do some investigation, correct the issue, and the incident is closed. But of course, these not all incidents go that way. Sometimes incidents are very wide-ranging. It might involve multiple services or all your services if it's something like a data center outage, and it can involve many people, up to more than 100 people resolving a particular incident. So what can we learn from Agile principles to apply to incident management? I think there's an analogy to be made between a sprint and an incident response. And so to set the stage, let's talk about the Agile Manifesto. I'm sure everyone has this memorized or in a laminated card in their wallet, but in case you've forgotten it, what the Agile Manifesto states is that some things are more important than others. And in particular here, the things on the left are more important than the things on the right. So although processes and tools are important, we value people and interactions between them more. Similarly, working software is more important than comprehensive documentation. We prefer to collaborate with customers rather than negotiate contracts with customers. And finally, responding to change is more important than following a plan. So although the things on the right have value, the things on the left have more value. And when we talk about incident management, I think we can recast the Agile Manifesto and see what we can apply to incident management in the same spirit. So resolver collaboration is more important than processes and tools. So it's important to have your incident resolvers be able to collaborate effectively and come up with creative solutions to an incident rather than following a rigid process. Incidents are always unexpected, so process only goes so far when you're dealing with something that you didn't expect. Automation is more important than documentation, so it's great to have a document that tells you what to do when you are remediating an incident, but having an automated tool to do that for you is much faster and much less error prone. So we value autonomy more than policy and standards, meaning that it is job number one to get a service restored when you have an incident, and policy and standards are there as guidelines, but ultimately you have to get that service back up and running as soon as possible. And finally, continuous improvement is more important than accountability. So it's more important that a team continues to improve their response to incidents and their incident management practices than it is to have them be accountable for the incident happening in the first place. So Scrum, being an implementation of Agile Principles, has some rituals and processes that I think are interesting to apply to incident management as well. The first one being the foundation of Scrum, which is time-boxed iterations. I think this applies equally, if not more so, to incident management. It's very easy to get lost in a diagnostic activity and lose track of the fact that you have perhaps a customer SLA that says you have to restore service within 15 minutes. You need reminders to be able to decide, okay, is this the time now to have a complete failover to a secondary region? Do I have enough time to continue trying to diagnose this issue? So that's very useful. Secondly, retrospectives are key to that continuous improvement aspect that I mentioned earlier. So holding retrospectives after every incident allows you to continuously improve hopefully avoid similar incidents in the future. Incidents are bad enough. Having multiple incidents for the same root cause is even worse. And being able to respond more quickly over time to unexpected events is facilitated by these retrospectives. And finally, it might be interesting to compare the role of an incident manager to the role of a Scrum Master. The primary mission of the Scrum Master being removing obstacles for team members. I think for incidents that involve more than one person, that really is the core of what an incident commander is supposed to do. When there are subject matter experts involved in diagnosing and remediating an issue, the role of Scrum Master becomes making sure those folks are not blocked and can complete their tasks as quickly as possible. So DevOps is obviously very closely related to incident management in the sense that it is the DevOps movement that has put folks like software engineers on call and responsible for the services that they produce. And a lot of the barriers to adoption to DevOps were actually cultural. And I think that having a cross-functional team in the DevOps sense, so for example, software engineers, operations engineers, testers, user experience experts, perhaps product owners, having all of those folks on a single team presented certain challenges, and those challenges are equally, if not more, applicable to incident management. So in an incident management scenario, you might have all the folks I mentioned, plus you might have folks from customer support, you might have executives, you might have customers involved in the communications. And a couple of things are important to note here. One is making sure that your communication is appropriate to your audience. So when communicating with a non-technical audience, avoiding jargon or overly technical explanations. Similarly, we want to communicate with folks in the tools that they are accustomed to. So although developers might want to be on a Slack channel to collaborate, executives are likely going to want to be on a conference bridge. And customers are probably most appropriately communicated with using something like a status page, depending. In any case, something to keep in mind in terms of the various cultures of the folks involved in an incident. Another thing that DevOps advocates is aggressive automation, and I think that this is really important in the context of incident management. Because in the middle of the night, it's so easy to make mistakes or for things to take a long time. If you have tools to execute actions that are automatable, again, they can happen quickly, save you time, and avoid manual error. Lastly, I'd like to talk about what we can make use of from SRE, that is Site Reliability Engineering. If you're not familiar, this is an implementation of DevOps that has been documented by Google. There is something called the SRE Handbook. If you're not familiar with it, highly recommend you check it out. It's very interesting and useful. And one of the core tenets of SRE is embracing risk. And this is key to incident management as well. And what I mean by that is, although it would be nice to think that incidents won't happen or that we can prevent all incidents, the fact is that if we are being innovative, if we are pushing the boundaries and trying to build competitive services, we are going to have incidents. So accepting that and preparing for it and mitigating the downsides of incidents is the best strategy. Eliminating toil is also foundational for SRE. So toil is repeated actions that add no long-term value to a particular service. Important, of course, just in terms of any sort of software development, but in the case of incident management, having any sort of manual activity or non-value add activity being required to remediate an incident costs you time. So eliminating that as much as possible is a good thing to do. And another thing that SRE does very nicely is puts a focus on customer experience in the form of service level objectives. So there are many metrics that we can collect and monitor. What SRE advocates for is having the most important metrics be those that proxy customer experience. So, for example, the responsiveness of a web experience is something that we can measure that would be very important to customer experience. If there are errors on a back-end service that are being retried that ultimately aren't contributing negatively to customer experience, those ones are perhaps less important. And if you're looking for some guidance on what the most important metrics might be, I suggest you go and take a look at golden signals. There are 4 golden signals that really reflect the health of a service, and you can apply these to your particular service. One more thing before we jump into a demo. This is not necessarily directly related to Agile Principles, but with something like Scrum, you get to practice every sprint. Every sprint is followed by another sprint, so you're continuously improving the way that you approach that and adapting to changes. When it comes to incidents, hopefully you are not in a place where you feel like you have plenty of practice with them. You're dealing with incidents every day. So it is, unless you're in that situation, it is easy to get out of practice or not get practice until a real incident occurs. So it's very useful to be able to have fake incidents, have safe spaces to make mistakes and learn. So at xMatters, we do this on a weekly basis. Some of the benefits are teams get very confident with the incident management process. They feel like they are practiced, and they feel confident that they will be able to handle any issue as it comes up. Over the course of that, processes get refined. So if there are things that aren't working, that becomes very clear through this practice process, and the processes get made more efficient over time. Any things that are repeated, we can identify them and expand automation to cover those. So diagnostic activities or remediation activities, those can be automated. So time to get into a demo. So just before I do that, I'd like to set the stage with a fictional customer called the Tyrell Corporation. You may have heard of them. They are the world's foremost purveyor of artificial humans. And like many of our real customers, they're in a digital transformation transition. And so they have multiple cultures within their company. So one team within their company is their web admin team. They're responsible for the web administrative interface for Androids. And it's a very important service because we all know what happens when Androids go unsupervised. We've all seen the movies. So this team is responsible for the operation of that interface. They are a DevOps team, and as such, they have a tool chain that might appear familiar to you for their CI/CD pipeline. They use Git and Jenkins. They have a critical infrastructure component called RabbitMQ that they use for queuing. For any software issues, they use Jira for tracking those, like many software developers. One of their monitoring tools is New Relic for performance monitoring. And they live and breathe in Slack. So they prefer to communicate via Slack. But that team does not exist in a vacuum. So there is a major incident management team that is responsible for any incidents over a given severity. And they adhere to corporate standards. So one of those standards is that ServiceNow is the source of truth for any of these major incidents. And for major incidents, in order to reduce the number of inbound inquiries from customers, it's required that a status page be posted for that incident. So that's the setup, and I'm going to head on over to a demo environment. Let's go check that out. All right, so what we have here is the xMatters mobile interface. Over here on the right, we have Slack and then the xMatters web interface. What is happening is that the Tyrell web interface is slowing down, and New Relic is detecting that there is a performance issue. So as the person on call for this particular service, I'm going to have an alert delivered to me. And there it is. And if I go and check out this alert, I get some of the information I would expect, such as that there is an issue. I get a link into New Relic so I can get more details about what the customer experience is. But I'd like to call your attention here to some of the diagnostics that have been run for me automatically. So first I have the size of a rabbit queue. And as an SME for this service, I know that having almost 7,500 messages in the queue is not a good thing. I also have a couple of pieces of information that might help me diagnose this. I have a commit from Greg Smart. So it looks like he's maybe up to no good. And immediately following that commit was a deploy. So I have a couple of clues there as to what the problem might be. So as I mentioned, I know that that queue size does not look good. So I'm immediately going to declare a major incident. And what happens there is xMatters has run some automation that helps in resolving these incidents. And you may have noticed in the background here, something has happened in Slack. So I have a Slack channel that's been created. And in the Slack channel, I have a bunch of information. First of all, a Jira ticket has been created for me, a ServiceNow ticket, a status page has been posted, and an xMatters incident has been created as well. I also have conference bridge information. So because this is a major incident, we've taken the nuclear option. We're basically pulling out all the stops to resolve this issue. So I can click on each of these. I also want to point out that the name of this particular channel here, just take note of that. You don't have to remember it. There's no test. But I'll point out why that's important in just a moment. So first of all, we can see that we have a new Jira ticket that's been created in case there are any sort of software changes that need to be made as a result of remediating this incident. I have that ready to go. I don't have to do that manually. Similarly, a ServiceNow ticket has been created. I'll just log in. So in the ServiceNow ticket, I can scroll down and see that all of the other artifacts that have been created are cross-linked. That was the same with the Jira ticket over here. I have a status page that's been posted so that customers asking about their replicant management service will know that we are working on the issue, and they will perhaps not call in to complain. And finally, here we can see the xMatters incident console that has been created. We have a summary of the issue, a description of the issue. We have engaged a couple of teams to take a look at the issue. We have some well-defined roles here. We have collaboration channels that have been created for us. And in addition to that, we have a timeline that is keeping track of everything that happens during an incident. So I'm going to set this to in progress. And you can see down here, every action that I've taken has been recorded in the timeline for post-mortem purposes. No one has to do that manually. So these resolvers are being engaged. I can do that dynamically as well. I can notify some more teams. If I wanted to notify, for example, the XM API or the web service lead team, I can do that and gather more people to help me with resolving this incident. Supposing we do that, we resolve the incident, I can then set this incident to resolved. And at this point, xMatters is closing the books on the incident, calculating the most important metrics, and all of these feed into the postmortem process. So here we have information such as how long it took us to detect the issue. We did that very quickly. How long folks took to acknowledge the issue. How long the impact was from the point of view of a customer. We have some, and how long it took us to resolve the incident. We also have some information on how long we spent in each status, so we can use this to optimize our process if we're finding we're spending way too much time in any particular status, as well as how long we spent in each severity. So there's a lot to this, and one of the aspects of it is being able to run a very thorough postmortem. But one thing I want to point out before we're out of time is I want to show you that all of this that I've shown you is not actually baked into the product, so to speak. These workflows are all developed in a codeless fashion in this view here, which is called the Flow Designer. So looking at the message that we were originally provided with when this issue occurred, you can see all of these diagnostics here. There's a one-to-one between these and these steps in the Flow Designer. So this step is going and getting that rabbit queue. This one is going and getting the commit information from GitHub, etc. So all of this automation is specific to the team and is put together in a codeless fashion. Similarly, when we declared a major incident, another flow ran. So we can see that the response options that we saw there in this view here have a one-to-one correspondence with these response options, and automations can be run based on all of those responses. We chose the create major incident response, and here we see that flow being run. So we have an issue being created in Jira, followed by an issue being created in ServiceNow. We created an incident with status page and an incident record in xMatters. We engaged responders, and then we cross-linked all of those artifacts together by updating ServiceNow and Jira. Finally, just taking a look down here, this flow supports both Teams and Slack. We took the Slack path, and what we did was create a channel, invited folks to a channel, and then posted, again, all of the links to those artifacts within that we created earlier in the flow. And I pointed out earlier the channel name that was used to create the Slack channel. That was, in fact, the ServiceNow incident ID. If you had a sharp eye, you might have noticed that. So all of these steps work together in a codeless fashion. There was no coding used to link up this tool chain. The way that it works is that every step has outputs, and you can use those outputs in subsequent flows, or subsequent steps, such as this. So in order to create the channel name with the ServiceNow incident number, I can just drag and drop that over there. So that's how that works. So the reason I wanted to cover this is that it brings together a lot of the ideas that we've talked about. It talks about automating common actions, such as creating a conference bridge, creating a Slack channel, engaging resolvers, posting information into third-party systems that are systems of record. It also bridges cultures, so folks that want to collaborate on a conference bridge can do that. Folks that want to collaborate in Slack can do that. Folks that want to look at a ServiceNow ticket for their information, they can do that as well. And as you go through the incident management process, you will find new ways to automate the common tasks and resolve incidents faster, which is the most important thing. So that's what I have for you today. I look forward to your questions. Thanks very much.